Hey guys, it's Tricia here with TriciaSitemere.com, and I hope you are having a phenomenal day. We are moving right along with my topic of the month for July, which is taking the leap. And so I'm excited about this conversation with Miss Joy because she has taken the leap in a very interesting arena. So we are both coaches. So as you guys know, I am more on the career side, the fulfillment coaching side. Joy has taken a very interesting lens for coaching on the relationship and love side. So I'm going to let her introduce herself. We're going to be talking about how she has taken the leap and how taking the leap has shaped her own journey. So with that, I will let Joy, Pink Girl Teaches, do her introduction.
First of all, thank you so much for having me here and letting me be a guest on here. I appreciate this so much.
Of course.
And as far as me taking the leap, listen, I had to take the leap because the first leap I took was the one that saved my life. You know, I had to change the own trajectory of my life. And once I began to walk in the passion that I now had in my newfound self, I was like, wow. And then I could see people around me who were dealing with the same issues that I had been through and that I had overcome. And so it only was natural and what felt normal for me to be a bridge to help them overcome the issues that they have within their relationships. So I am a life and relationship coach, but I'm more focused in love recovery. I I coach victims of narcissistic abuse as well as sexual assault.
Okay, so some very heavy topics, very much on the opposite side of what I do in career and fulfillment. So tell us a little bit about your background. So you said the first leap that you took was from a personal standpoint. How did the personal and professional, how did it kind of cross to where you are now in the love and relationship or love recovery space?
Okay, that's a great question. So how it all started is like we have to go back into my beginning, and I was sexually assaulted as a child.
Okay.
So I grew up with that shame, with insecurities. Really, I grew up codependent. A lot of depression and all the things that follow with it. So naturally I was vibrating on a very low frequency. I couldn't see myself, none of those things. And so as an adult, I started making decisions from a hurt place. I started making decisions that the 4-year-old me would be making. And you can't have a child deciding to be in marriage. And so what happens is where we usually meet trauma in life is sometimes it can arrest your development, and that's where I was. So it took me really hitting rock bottom in my marriage to say that, okay, this is enough. I'm not gonna put a band-aid over this anymore. Right. And I'm gonna do the work to be better. So that was the very first leap. And I mean, it took years, decades even, for me to get to that point, but I was just at rock bottom. And sometimes that's where you need to be, because that's a solid foundation to start building on anyway. So I did the work, went to therapy, and dove into a lot of research on my own and did a lot of self work to begin to reprogram my mind in the way that I saw things. And so it just felt natural for me to take the step and help other people, because they always came to me for questions, and I would be like, why? Because I couldn't see myself. And so, one thing that I do believe about life is the very things that you want you. So just like you are a career and fulfillment coach, there's somebody who needs you, and you need that person. And so it was just kind of the marriage of those two things. And I was like, okay, that's it. Here I am.
Okay. All right, cool. I definitely agree with your point. Like sometimes you do have to get to that rock bottom stage. And if you feel like, okay, hey, I've run out of options, the only place to go is up. And so you start taking those steps gradually to rebuild yourself and to find, whatever your new direction is going to be going forward. So you are a love recovery coach, and you also have a podcast. Share a little bit about how you work with your clients and a little bit about your podcast.
So the podcast, Project Real Love. So that's my baby. You know, I- it really just was a step because I felt like, how do, sometimes you wait for opportunities to come to you, but none were happening for me.
Sometimes you got to create them.
And that's exactly what that was about. I decided, you know what? Okay, step outside the box again. You don't have to wait for anybody to serve you with anything. You have a message and it's important, get it out there. And so I did. At first I was like, oh, I don't know how to do this. I won't, and you have so much doubt and a lot of questions. But I feel like sometimes we wait for a perfect situation before we step out, or sometimes we just use that insecurity or that fear as a crutch and never do anything.
Right.
But I decided that, you know what? No. So now I'm kind of like the person that when she gets an idea, she just jumps on it. And then I'll be like, oops, I should have, slowed down a bit. But, I think like when I go back and I listen to the very first episodes, I cringe a lot because I'm like, ooh, you messed up there, but I think it shows the growth that's there. And sometimes it's great to look back and see where you started and where you are. And so that in itself, actually, that's where clients started connecting with me from. They began, it's amazing. Like I always wonder, like, who are these people that tune in and are you okay? And, I say those things to myself, but like I said, what you want wants you. And so they're the ones that take that step and say, hey, I need some help. This is what I'm dealing with.
Okay. So talk to me about some of the challenges that maybe you encountered when taking the lead. So, I've been having some of these smaller side conversations, also focusing on my theme for the month of July with my one-on-one clients. And we have talked a lot around imposter syndrome of feeling like, hey, I don't think I can actually do this, and how you work through those thoughts. My last guest, Tiffany, we talked a lot about shame, and you also, mentioned shame or touched on shame just a moment ago. What are maybe some of the challenges that you encountered on your journey taking the leap to being a love and recovery coach and then now having the podcast?
So I think for me, one of the main things was that negative self-talk. Mm-hmm. The very things that you put inside yourself, and mind you, had been doing it for so long. Mm-hmm. And so now, when I would get the idea, like, go ahead and do this and start this, and you want to coach and, start the podcast, and you're like, who are you? First of all, you're going to fail and you're going to make a fool of yourself. So you can't do that. But, it's always remembering your why. Why do I want to do this? Why is it important to me? And so my why was really like, I always did it to honor that younger me, to let her know that, what, we're good. That didn't define you. And, life goes on. And really, some of the things that feel like, are set to bury you are the very things that, that really push you through. And, you grow and you learn, because I wonder sometimes, would I really be at this point in life had I not experienced it? Because I do feel like, I'm equipped for something, sometimes it's, you hear a lot of people, especially when we get into narcissism, right? You hear a lot of people say like, I can't talk to anybody about this because nobody understands what it's like. And that's very true, because unless you've experienced that insidious abuse, they'll tell you, oh, just get over it. It's just a breakup. It's nothing. But how do you say it's just a breakup when you spent years with somebody, only to find out double, triple, quadruple lives? None of it was real from the beginning. And so, those things are very devastating to people. And, since I could relate to that, it just kind of continued to reinforce me. So when the negative self-talk would begin, I'm like, no, you have to do this. You said you were going to do it. And it's just continuing to try to honor the future version of myself. I don't want to be bound by the chains of yesterday.
Right. That's beautiful. So you've taken the leap. How long have you had the podcast, and how long have you been doing Love Recovery?
So the podcast is 2 years.
It flies by fast.
Right. I was so proud of her, of the podcast when she turned 1. I had a whole birthday party and I
Yeah.
wore a tiara and everything, just extra. But, it's great because, listen, I was somebody who was not consistent,
Mhm.
but I've showed up 52 episodes last year. And
Wow.
because I started getting busier this year, I had to break it into seasons.
Okay.
And so once I'm off season with the podcast, I had to put something else in the mix. YouTube. So
Got it. Okay. All right. So one question for you is, now that you've been at it for 2 years, you've, you know, gone through the process of taking the leap and building out your coaching practice as well as your podcast and now your YouTube. If you had to go back and do things differently, is there anything specific that you would do differently, or what is maybe some advice you would give to yourself as you were starting your practice or your podcast?
wow. I think, I would encourage myself to take the leap and just be more confident than I was. There are times when I think if you can hear it in my voice, it's shaking. And I would just say, listen, you got this. I would just try to encourage myself because when you're going into unfamiliar territory, it is scary. But I think a lot of the things that I was worried about were pressures that I put on myself because nobody
Right.
else was worried about those things.
Mhm.
And so when you're stepping into something so unfamiliar, it's okay. There's so many things that you can learn along the way. And when we take that pressure off ourselves, we can at least enjoy the journey a bit more because those are moments that won't come back. And, those are defining moments in your life. And so when you have those pressures, and it doesn't even matter when it's like if it's a podcast or a YouTube channel, but even when you're parenting, like I remember being a first time mom and
Mhm.
being so scared to breastfeed because my baby was a preemie and I felt like my breast was bigger than her head, but and so I would pull back from feeding her, but like those are moments you can't get back. So even though these things scare us, and it's not to invalidate your fear because it's real, but don't let it hold you back. Just keep going forward because like you can do it. You really can. A lot of the times it's ourselves who say the things that we can't do, whether maybe it's because we've heard it growing up from
Mhm.
other people, or like for me, that's I put those titles on myself. So you have to rip those false labels off
Yep.
and begin to reaffirm yourself.
Yep. Nice. Okay. So forward thinking, because I'm always looking at, okay, how do we plan our next steps? What is our plan of action going forward? And part of it is it's not just taking the leap once. It's that daily commitment to continue to leap, and almost bet on yourself every day. So what are maybe some areas where you are continuing to take a leap, or some areas where you're planning on doing different things, or maybe expanding your business or your podcast?
Yeah, I have to take the leap, okay? And this is going to be a big leap of faith because I just feel like I don't have enough hours in the day because I still work my job.
Hmm.
And I've been starting to have that conversation with myself that, listen, it's time to let that go and focus on what you're doing. And then, that voice comes up again like,
Hmm.
oh, well, you might not make it, but I've been making it this time.
Yeah.
I'm getting busier. So it's just trying to always remind myself. And, part of that means that if we're going to take this, we need a date. And so I haven't come up with one yet, but I know
Okay.
that I need to make a realistic or set a realistic goal. And when it comes, then it's here and we're just going to dive right on in. But, there's steps that I can take, I know, to be
Right.
sure that I'll be okay.
Yeah, yeah, that's actually a really good point. We've been talking a lot about taking the leap, and taking the leap can be scary. And it's like, okay, I'm nervous, I'm anxious, I'm whatever. I'm just going to do it. And like the act of doing it, yes, is important, but the planning aspect of it is probably just as important, if not more, to make sure that, you know, when you do go ahead and take that leap, you take that step, that you have a higher chance of, you know, succeeding or accomplishing whatever goal it is that you've just set out to take the leap on. So I love that you touched on that. Like, I'm a huge planner with my checklists and success formulas and all of this stuff. So I really love that you said that, and I'm going to hold you to it. We're going to have more conversation.
Please hold me, because I back out of my own plans. No, not anymore though.
Perfect. No, it's a conversation that I have in my own head every now and again. It's like, okay, you know, I still have my full-time work, and then I have Control Alt Delete. When am I ready? And so, like, I also have my list of criteria, or my metrics, if you will, of things where it's like, okay, I'm getting a little bit closer. This is how I want to plan this out before I'm ready to take the leap, because I am not exempt myself from leaping. And
Right.
so, you know, I think that being able to have the conversations and highlight, you know, that people are taking leaps that are changing their lives, that are challenging them, that are helping them grow, that are saving their lives, you know, like the example that you gave. And I think that there's just a lot to be learned from these stories, but also a really interesting way of building community of support, where it's like, hey, you know, I am nervous about this, but I'm not alone in this, and there are other people who have experienced similar situations, and that, hey, there is great things on the other side of taking the leap. So I really appreciate you sharing your story. I know that, you know, your road to love recovery coaching, and, you know, the clients that you serve comes from a very personal place. So I really appreciate that. Can you tell everyone who's watching how they can find you and continue to learn from you in your coaching?
Sure, and thank you so much for that. So I am Pink Girl Teaches all over social media. Anywhere you can plug in somebody's name, Pink Girl Teaches. And my website is pinkgirlteaches.com.
Okay, perfect. Well, I appreciate you. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. As always, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, emotional outbursts, please send them my way. You can find me via my email, ts@triciasitemere.com. And until next time, onward and upward.